Welcome to the section of our course about mixing your music. In this tutorial, I'll be giving you an intro and an overview of mixing. Remember that I said recording can be broken down into the management of three simple dimensions of sound: dynamics, frequency content, and pan position. If you properly manage these properties of each sound, then you can record a good input. If you can mix to manage these properties, then you create a high-quality recording output. When we talk about mixing, we're not so much talking about an arrangement like a club mix, a live mix, etc., but how to blend tracks together so they work as one holistic unit. Mixing includes, but certainly isn't limited to, adjusting the volume up and down so that no track is too loud or too soft, and so that the instruments blend well together. When we mix, we also adjust the panning. That's the location of sound in your stereo system, left to right. That's just the tip of the iceberg. Mixing's different from mastering. Generally, they're held as two separate processes. Mixing concentrates on the individual parts of a project, whereas mastering concentrates on the overall sound of the song and the album. Sometimes you do use the same tools for both mixing and mastering, but your goals are different, and the way you use the tools is different. Can you mix and master at the same time? Well, while it is technically possible, it's not a good idea. For example, when you pan your mix, you're looking for the sweet spot for each instrument in the song. You've taken care to spread out the instruments in the stereo field. But when you master, you find that it somehow doesn't sound as wide or spacious as a commercial CD, or that there's a lot of unevenness in the stereo images between songs. You apply a stereo expansion plug to help manage this. We'll be talking more about mastering and how to use mastering plugins later in this course. While you're mixing, your software lets you create groups of tracks that simplify the mixing process. In Pro Tools, they're called group tracks. In Cubase, they're called group channels. Groups allow you to control a large number of tracks with just a few faders. For example, you can manage all your drums with one fader if they're grouped together. Automation is one of the coolest features of digital audio workstations. You'll be using automation a lot during the mixing process. With analog recording and mixing, getting the volume and the panning had to be done live as the audio was prepared for final output. But with automation, you program the levels over time, and then the controls move up and down or left to right automatically during playback. When you mix, you need to know your mixing goals. What kind of emotional effect do you want the song to have on the listener? Which ingredients in the song contribute the most toward creating this effect? Is it a thumping kick drum, a sensuous melody, the really impressive lyrics, or some other unusual instrumentation or harmony? Some tips and thoughts you can start out with. Mixing is a real art and can take a long time to get a feel for, so practice, practice, practice is what you need in addition to studying a few of the basics. It's pretty normal for a song to take longer to mix than it did to record. You might even be sick of the song after listening to it over and over, so that's why it's important to take breaks and come to the music with fresh ears. Your mixing will also be influenced by the acoustics of your environment and your monitors, so it's important to listen in many different environments: in your car, in a friend's home or studio, in headphones, in different monitors, some big, some small, in different positions in the stereo panning field of your studio, etc. Headphones will give you the detail, and the stereo image doesn't change as you move your head or position. But they don't give you a true read of low frequencies, whereas monitors will. Watch out for monitors that are too close to the wall. This causes bass frequencies to build up, especially if they're in the corners and the ceiling or floor. The louder you listen, the worse the bass buildup is going to be. You need to compromise so that your work sounds satisfactory on all the systems you try it out on. That's your goal. Mix as you go. Make sure the instruments that are down are balanced and sound right before you add the next instrument. Are the levels all over the place? Is there a lot of EQing that needs to be done? Do it now to maximize your sound so you can make the final mix down as simple as possible, and so you can understand the true quality and usability of your input. If you think, I'll fix it with effects later, that is just not going to work. There's always a bit of trade-off between the vocals and the instruments. If the instruments overshadow the vocals, they have less impact. But you don't want a huge vocal to make the instruments sound small. There's different ways of mixing the vocals and instruments across different genres. In rock and pop music today, vocals and drum cymbals tend to be really, really loud. Listen carefully to some pieces whose mix you really like. Do your research. Ideally, listen to something of similar genre and whose mix you'd like to emulate. Listen at a moderate volume, not too loud. And don't get discouraged. A professional CD will have been mixed and mastered by super professional dudes, and it took them a long time. Understand that music tends to sound better loud. We like to listen to our stuff loud and we like to mix it loud, but you need to listen and mix as well with the monitors low enough so that you can have a conversation over the music. This is kind of like zooming out. It gives you a broad listen of the song. You'll hear right away what's jumping out too much and what's not loud enough. Keep your monitors low for about half of your mixing time. Document your mix carefully so you know what you did in case you need to come back, and so you can repeat it again with another mix if you want to, without having to start from scratch. If you don't have a lot of experience mixing, you might just decide to set the volume levels of each track and leave it at that. To make a professional-sounding recording, however, you need to mix more carefully and critically. You need to consider the dynamics, frequency content, and pan position of every instrument as well as their relationships, such as between the lead and rhythm guitar, the vocals and the background vocals, etc. Each instrument will have what's called a sweet spot where it fits perfectly in the mix without sticking out too much, without being too bright or harsh or low and dull. In my next video, we'll go through a mixing checklist to help guide you in your listening. If you've been working really hard on your mix and all of a sudden it sounds really awful, but you're not sure why, you need to take a break and then start again. Save the mix, and then on a new file, wipe the board, return the faders to 0, keep the EQ flat, and pan back to center. Start again with your drums. Keep in mind that the kick needs to be louder than the snare to balance out in the final mix. Then bring in the hi-hat, but don't overdo it. Then bring in the bass, adjusting the EQ so it's not muddied with the kick drum. Next, pull in the rhythm instruments, keyboards, guitars, and then the melodic lead instruments, guitar, vocals, etc. And now you're ready to start fine-tuning again. This concludes our introduction to mixing.